Hello and welcome to the Power Pod. Today we have a very special episode because this is the first ever time that we are live in studio, and what a guest I have for you today. Please welcome none other than Mike Sham of State of the Nation, Political Insider, and now the Bottom Line ZA.
Yeah,
Mike, it's great to be here with you. How are you doing today?
Matthew, good. Thank you for inviting me. Good to speak to you.
No, it's great to speak to you as well. And I really just had to get a hold of you, Mike, because, of course, all three of your channels have had a lot of interesting content lately. But I'm specifically intrigued by what's going on with State of the Nation right now, because I think anybody watching at home knows that elections are coming. They're right around the corner, and pretty much everybody's talking about it. And I mean, you've had interviews with Helen Zille recently, Herman Mashaba, even some of the other Joberg mayoral candidates
Yep.
from smaller parties. And you've also spoken to elections analysts like Wayne Sussman. And so I'd really love for us to start off by getting a bit of a temperature check. Because, Mike, you and I are in Joburg. We're pretty invested in this place. And so I'd love for us to start off by looking at what's going on in the Joburg race. And so just with all of the insights that you've gathered, Mike, what can you tell us about the mood? Who does it seem is getting momentum going into this election?
Well, I think a good place to kick off is two very strange things about the situation. We are now about 3 months out from the election,
Yeah.
give or take, right? And the most bizarre thing is that the ANC still hasn't announced a candidate as we record this. It could happen within the next time, but they still haven't. They racked with factional fighting,
Yeah.
right? So one faction wanted the current mayor to stand, and one that was the faction led by Fikile Mbalula, and one faction led by Panyaza Lesufi and Paul Mashatile. They coupled on the tote, those two. One, Loyiso Masuku. She's the woman that, together with her husband, who used to be in the Gauteng provincial legislature, stole PPE money. So she's exactly fits that bill. They wanted her to be the candidate, right? And it seems like they might come out with a compromise candidate in Frank Chikani. So really, the crazy thing is that, so that's about the election thing. But I mean, the crazy thing is, until that happens, or as we live in Johannesburg, the place just falls apart by the day. The situation gets more dire for the incumbent. So, the potholes get bigger. We live this, the fewer street lights work, no traffic lights work, etc. And yet they're 3 months away from election day. It's almost like they've given up on the election. So it's a very bizarre tactic that the ANC is using, which if you really sort of wanted to analyze it, would say, like, these guys are just getting ready to lose bad, right?
Right.
In the last election in Johannesburg, they got about 35, 36%. It's kind of looking like it could go down to anything. They're just not campaigning at all, okay? So they're giving people no reason to vote for them. It's not like they can step back and say, well, look how wonderful this place is running. No, it's falling apart by every measure. And even the ANC finance minister is withholding money because they're stealing too much money.
Wow.
Right? So that's the first thing, which is, it's crazy in the history of politics. I don't know if I've ever seen this before, right?
Same here.
That a party is just doing nothing. That's number one. And number two, Helen Zille effect. Helen Zille has come into the race. And I think that we must understand what the Helen Zille effect is. It's a twofold effect. Number one is that South Africa runs on party systems, we know, not individuals. We don't have direct elections. Nowhere are you going to vote, is there going to be a name for you to vote for? You are voting for a party.
Right.
And even theoretically, let's say after election day, the DA could change their candidate. You'd have no say in the matter as the voter. But they have changed the script by saying, this is our candidate. This is the person who will be the mayor if we win. And that has set the cat amongst the pigeons, especially on those patrician top-down parties like the ANC who want to be in charge of everything. They want to keep all their subjects scared, so they've never really announced mayors beforehand.
Yes.
They said it looks like maybe Matthew's going to be our candidate, but maybe not. So Matthew better behave himself, kind of, right? That kind of thing. So she's upended the thing by being the face of the campaign so vividly. And the other thing is that because she's such a big personality and because they've run such an aggressive campaign, everybody's campaigning against her as if she's the mayor.
Right.
That's the bizarre thing. You talk about me talking to all these mayoral candidates, and I think I'm up to about 5 or 6. Some of them won't get many votes, but Rise Mzansi have put quite a prominent mayoral candidate out in Lekona Nguni. Build One South Africa put out Nobuntu Hlatso Webster as their deputy president, as their mayoral candidate.
Okay,
they're taking
they're
it
number
seriously.
2.
But the point is that they come here and they talk about their campaign against Helen Zille. They're not talking about their campaign against Dada Marrero, who's the current mayor, or whoever else is in those parties. So it's almost like she's almost presumed the position of mayor.
That's fascinating stuff.
Oh.
It just shows you how she has gotten into the psychology of everybody. And I mean, it's excellent marketing, like you said, because I think so many people are not taking this into account, that you're not going to go there and see, okay, who am I voting for as mayor? Herman, Mashaba, Helen Zille. You're still voting for your party. And you've just reminded me with this conversation topic, Mike, that I've spoken to a lot of people who will say to me, well, I'm not really a fan of the DA. Jordan Hill-Lewis is this, John Steenhuisen is that, but I'll vote for them because it's Helen Zille.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
It's an interesting thing, and it's going to be exactly the way politics should be, in that you could have people that don't like the Democratic Alliance, but see Helen Zille as a potential solution to the problem, voting for Helen Zille or voting for the DA because they're voting for Helen Zille. So you're starting to see politics the way it's meant to be, where you may have a great local representative in your town, village, city, whatever it is, and you would say, well, this person would make the best mayor, therefore I'm not seeing their party as such, I'm seeing them as the answer. Okay. That starts becoming kind of what happens in places, more mature democracies. You see it all over Europe, where mayors are very important people. You see it in America, where it's all about the individual that you're voting for.
Yes.
I think we're kind of heading there quite quickly, only because the party system is subject to too much interference, often at local level.
How do you mean?
What I mean is that, let's just say a party wins the mayorship in this city. Okay. For starters, they could change that person tomorrow. You didn't vote, you voted for the party. Therefore, as we said earlier, they could change that candidate. They could change that candidate 6 months later. In fact, just recently, there's a story of the ANC literally suspending a mayor because the mayor blocked a cadre deployment. Wow. So one of their own mayors has been in the position for 5 weeks, and she's done, by all accounts, a good job in the 5 weeks, shaking things up. They wanted to deploy somebody to a key position in the mayoral committee. She said no, they suspended her. So when that starts happening, people would say, that's where what I mean by political party meddling.
Right.
You could also have a situation where the political party leaders, for example, could decide, no, you don't go with this coalition, you go with that coalition, because we've decided from on high.
Ah, yes. And we're seeing that multi-layer government come into play, especially since the formation of the GNU, because there's always that argument. And beyond just the GNU, you've also got the sort of the GPU in KZN as an example. So it's very relevant what you're saying. And I like you bringing this into the conversation, Mike, because I think that, and then especially the Helen Zille effect, and especially the fact that they could change their candidate, it's things that we as voters don't really think about that often. So it's a very masterful...
And obviously, we've seen it in Johannesburg on steroids, where the candidates just been changed and changed and changed.
Yeah.
So who was on the picture on the poster is not...
It's just irrelevant.
Yeah.
Especially with these small parties that have been just propelled to the top by the ANC.
Yeah.
But I mean, it sounds like a very interesting situation. But tell me, Mike, I know that voter turnout has been a very big issue in recent years. We just see how I mean, for multiple election cycles, it just keeps dropping the
Hmm.
entire time. Do you have any feeling that if voter turnout continues to drop as many people expect, who do you think that actually damages and who does that benefit?
Okay, well, in the case of, let's stick with Johannesburg and maybe the Gauteng metros
Okay,
in general. The lower the turnout, the more it favors the Democratic Alliance. Their voters, and why I say the Democratic Alliance, and this isn't just code for white people, it's code for ratepayers.
sure.
Right? You would say that if you're a ratepayer, you want bang for your buck because you're paying up every month. So you're not exactly enjoying life, because when you have to drive through that pothole, you have paid for the repair of that pothole already, but the money's ended up in some comrade's pocket.
Okay,
So often, this to me is the distinction that we are not making in South Africa. Ratepayers have got a different motivation than non-ratepayers. We've got many non-ratepayers. A typical non-ratepayer will be somebody in a squatter camp.
yes,
They're not paying rates at all. So they're not really invested in, it doesn't matter to them too much as to whether their money is being squandered because they paid nothing in the first place.
right,
So all they're interested in is promises, really, because
yes,
they can just hope. So you make a bigger promise. You say we're going to build a school. You may or may not build that school. I say, no, I'm going to build 5 schools. They may go vote for me because I made a bigger promise. Either way, they've got no real skin in the game.
it's that social security, social grant promise every single time.
Yes. So, when it comes down to local elections, the ratepayers are probably more motivated to say, we want good governance.
Yes,
Which means that if you have a lower turnout, that ratepayer, let's say on average, is going to pitch up to vote anyway. So a lower turnout definitely favors the DA in local government elections. That's why they've traditionally done better at local government level.
that makes a lot of sense. So it's quite interesting to hear the point you made, especially about the ratepayers, Mike, because I think it doesn't get discussed enough. But something else that really comes to my mind is that we've seen how there's this sort of dissatisfaction in Cape Town and certain parts of the Western Cape. In numerous ways, there was the water tariff issue where AfriForum took the Cape Town Council to court. Just as an example, certain people are upset with their rates and things. Do you think that the dissatisfaction in Cape Town does translate to Gauteng, or do you think that the Western Cape and Gauteng really do seem to be viewing what I would actually call two different faces of the DA? So they're not even associating them as being one and the same.
I would call it the Herman Mashaba effect, and I'll tell you why I call it.
Interesting. We have the Helen
Only
Zille
because
now.
this came to the fore with when Herman Mashaba was the DA's mayor of Johannesburg.
Okay.
Okay, so what's been written into the code, this problem that we've got with some things in South Africa that get written into, hardwired into our code, and I think for very poor outcome, is that you've got to spend your money. Okay, now we're talking local government here, and even taxes. You must take the taxes from those people that earn, and you're going to get measured by how much money you spend on the people that don't pay taxes. Okay?
Right.
Which is kind of bizarre, because when we observe elections in successful countries, they're going to give money back to the people that pay taxes.
Yes.
Right? So in other words, at very least, you pay taxes, you're going to get a working train, you're going to get a working water, electricity, etc., etc. In South Africa, you almost get measured and get punished for not giving enough money to people that aren't paying any money. Right? So we've got this dichotomy. So what you've got is that, what do you ever know about the DA in the Western Cape? Is people moaning about the fact that they're not spending enough money in Khayelitsha. Right? Now,
Yeah, we hear that argument a lot.
We hear that argument a lot. Instead of the DA saying, no, we spend the right amount, they go out of their way to try and spend more money in places that'll never vote for them, which is kind of bizarre politically. But to stay, I suppose, politically correct, they then continue to tax people more and more while spending the money in places where people won't vote for them. It's kind of crazy.
It is.
Okay. And so you've got that effect in Cape Town, where they're trying to save face and to be seen not as this party that only looks after the former white areas, the suburbs, the touristy areas. But look what we're doing. We're building another, 1,000 houses in Crossroads or whatever it is.
Sure.
The Johannesburg situation, where our rates have actually been put up at a higher rate than in Cape Town, I'll just mind you, we just can't argue, because who do we argue to? No one listens. There, the money that gets those increases just go straight into the comrade's back pocket. So
Sure.
it's the same action. In both cases, the ratepayer is getting screwed, but in one case, it's going to non-ratepayer area in the Western Cape, and in Gauteng, the money is going into the comrades' pockets.
Interesting. So would you say it's almost a situation where people will say, I acknowledge the problem on that side down in the Cape, but at the same time, here are the options, and you're going to go sort of with the lesser of two evils, where at least, as a ratepayer, I'm going to get something back rather than absolutely zero.
Yeah, look, there is the honesty of the ballot box. That moment that you step inside and you say, who's most likely to collect my rubbish next week?
Right.
Who's most likely to make sure that when I open this tap, water flows out?
Right.
And that's why, for example, right now, you'll hear a lot of people say, I'm voting for the Freedom Front Plus.
Yeah.
You hear a lot of that, and it's no disrespect to the Freedom Front Plus, but what you do know is that the DA water will probably come out of the tap. So I'd rather vote for them. So, that's what generally happens. People then vote differently to the way they speak.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. And I think, again, it sort of speaks to how the DA does better at local elections than national, because I think national, that's when the ideology really comes into play. And that's why I think to myself, maybe if this whole Freedom Front Plus momentum happened at a national election, it could maybe have a higher ceiling. I don't know, but it could. Whereas locally, like a lot of people, even in Joberg, who I speak to, say they'll vote Freedom Front Plus. But then I think to myself, a lot of you guys who are not 100% convinced, you're going to get to the ballot box and you're going to think, Helen Zille was World Mayor of the Year. Let's just give her the mandate to do what she has to do.
Yeah, and there's also there's an advantage that the DA and the ANC have, right, in the electoral stakes. Now, I know I've just said advantage and ANC in the same sentence, so just let me finish first. Is that in both cases, they've got infrastructure.
Yes.
This isn't a commentary on whether they use it for good or for bad.
Of course.
They've got representation all over the show, that they could actually do what they say they do.
Yes.
So, you take, and we've seen it to prove this. Just let's look at those sort of entrepreneurial parties that have just started for the benefit of a few.
Sure.
So you vote for some useless party, and they end up abusing your vote because they don't have the infrastructure to do it. They don't have enough councillors. They don't have enough this, that, and the other. Al-Jamar, you've wasted your vote, or you in some ways worked against your own interests. Or in the Eastern Cape, in PE, Port Elizabeth, they've got this thing called the Northern Alliance.
Oh, with that Gary Funny Kirk.
So he just keeps on changing his vote. He's got no infrastructure. So if that's what sort of turns you on, you're going to get what you pay for, when you vote.
No, exactly. It's funny you bring up the Freedom Front Plus, because I actually have a very big question about them in Pretoria. But before we go further north, I have one last question before we wrap up Joburg, which is around ActionSA and Herman Mashaba. How do you see them performing?
I think he'll do well relative to every other place. He's still got name recognition. He's still, let's put it this way, he's an acceptable face for black township voters.
Okay,
that can't quite make the ideological step to vote for Helen Zille. It's just like, this is just too far. I can't go that far, right?
Sure.
He would be a compromise candidate. So I could see him, but will he do as well as he did in 2021 when he burst on the scene? You must understand that he's rolled the dice, so he is basically, as part of their strategy, have made it very difficult for. He got quite a few white voters in 2021.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
He's going to get almost none, because he's almost sort of gone full comrade on us.
Sure.
But he is still, if you look at other places, we'll talk about them now, they're probably better than the ANC. But so he could be an acceptable candidate. He'll do well, but I don't think he's going to do as well as he thinks.
I see. And just as you foreshadowed, yes, we are going to talk about that right now, because another place that I think often gets overlooked, but I find it even more fascinating than Joburg, a lot more fascinating, is Tshwane, because here you all of a sudden have Freedom Front Plus, who's pretty non-existent in Joburg, but boom, they've got Willie Spies as a candidate, big name recognition, worked with AfriForum, big Freedom Front Plus guy. You've got ActionSA, because of course a lot of people might forget, but Nasipi Moya is the mayor. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the first and only mayor ActionSA have had.
Yeah.
And it's of the capital city, no less. So, yes. That's a big deal. And of course, a lot to talk about because of how they decided to get Cilliers Brink out and bring in this new government. But then, of course, we still have Cilliers Brink, who wants to get back in the ring. And the ANC is still relevant, whether people believe it or not, regardless of whatever decline. So now that we've set the stage there, I'd like to start off by asking you, Freedom Front Plus, how do you think they could do? What is their ceiling?
Look, I think that they're going to do a lot better than they've done in the past. The Freedom Front Plus has never done overly well in the metros, in the past. But I think I think Pretoria will be good for them. Tshwane will be good for them. Certainly some areas, they gave the DA a big fright in a by-election in Centurion a while back, where they ran them, where they came from, I think, a couple of percent to almost 20%. I think that, you're looking at a party that'll clock up somewhere in the region of, 5-6% in Pretoria. It's way above their national average. So they'll do quite well there. And, there's the insurance of knowing that a vote for the Freedom Front Plus is kind of a vote for the DA.
Right.
So there is that insurance to know that they're natural coalition partners. They'll bicker and moan. And, this thing about coalitions, if you want to talk about it now or later, because it's a very big deal.
Yes.
And people don't quite understand what are the upsides and downsides for coalitions. So let me sort of pile in there. The danger with being in a coalition, and it was best on show when Helen Zille actually put together the coalition in Cape Town 20 years ago to take over the city of Cape Town. And she had a coalition, I think, of 13 parties or something crazy. And it held together, surprisingly. And she did particularly well as mayor. Okay, the city wasn't in such a desperate state, and and there was still some institutional memory. So they do a good job.
Yes.
And what ends up happening? She takes all of those parties out. All of those parties, their voters just say, there's no reason for me to vote for this one if I can vote for the DA, and this is the way I live.
Right.
So the real danger is that you're in a coalition and it works, if I'm the small party. And in many ways, that's, to my mind, this is me speaking, nobody else, ActionSA's decision to eject, to implode the coalition that they had with Cilliers Brink in Tshwane,
yes,
was because it was on the threshold of really breaking through and doing well.
Interesting.
Right? And if it does well, and you're now the junior partner in this coalition, right? And the DA has got 30% or whatever they had in Tshwane, and now they do a hell of a job, and
they're in the spotlight.
Suddenly all your voters, or certainly a significant number of your voters, will say, you know what, I actually like that party because they deliver. That's the danger with coalitions. That's why they hold together with bad governments, but not good government. Right? Because if there's bad government, it's fine. We're stealing. We're happy. So the Patriotic Alliance is always available. EFF always available to go into coalition with the ANC, because it doesn't harm their own brand, and they get to steal for 5 years. So that's why they're very comfortable in getting into these coalitions.
I see what you're saying. So just sort of judging by what you've laid out. Because of course you mentioned ActionSA in there. Do you think that there'll be, well, we've made a Herman Mashaba and Helen Zille effect. Could there be an Asipi Moyo effect?
I think there is that. The problem for Nasipi, and I rate her highly. As an individual, she's smart, she's tried hard, she's done everything, but she surrounded herself in this coalition with bad people.
Right.
And at some point, it's going to come through. There's this sort of stain of her coalition. So she's going to go there and say, I did a good job as mayor. I know that the city is still shit, but that's because of them. It's hard.
Sure.
So I think that she'll do okay. I don't think she'll do brilliantly, despite the fact that she's been mayor. You know, you could say, will the fact that what's his name, Gary van Niekerk in Port Elizabeth for a time was mayor, is that going to help the votes for Northern Alliance? No. Well, so you know what I mean. I'm just saying that it'll help her to a small degree, but I don't think to a large degree. Voters aren't that silly.
I see what you're saying. So, in summary, are we likely to see a DA Freedom Front Plus coming together? That's your Pretoria government.
They would need to get 50% plus one. That's going to be hard. It's going to be really, really, really hard. You know, this is the challenge for the DA, and I have spoken to Helen Zille out there. In actual fact, I thought that to go back to Helen Zille, but as a proxy for what they're thinking about, because I get the feeling that you're going to get a package deal. That's kind of the way I'm seeing it, that whatever coalitions are going to be hammered out, right, if they are to be successful, are going to be hammered out over the 3 metros in Gauteng.
Interesting.
So let's do a deal. And I wouldn't rule out a DA deal with ANC in all 3 metros. Wouldn't rule it out because it makes sense.
The numbers are there.
The numbers are there. They go through and they say, okay, fine, we do 3 metro deal somehow, and the deal is that you get the mayorship of Kuruleni and we get Johannesburg and Tshwane, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
it kind of makes sense to me,
Yes.
And then what is going to be a telling factor is who's got the biggest numbers.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, it does make sense to me. It's pretty depressing, if I'm honest, but
I think I don't think it's depressing, because the only way that it could work, the only way that it could actually happen, and we've seen shades of it in the government of national unity, it has been that let's understand, you just have to see, there's a court case underway at the moment of the former Minister of Defence and former Speaker of Parliament, Nosaviwe Mapisa Ngakula, who stole money brazenly, right? Corruption without even trying to sort of hide it. And you think to yourself, that was what was happening just in 2021. Now it would be almost unthinkable. We've seen, the woman hold on to some cars that belonged to the ANC Women's League, and she lost her job.
Yes.
That, in the Zuma era or the first term of Ramaphosa, people were stealing money brazenly.
Sure.
So there's already been a change in national government. I'm saying that change could come to provincial government. It would be difficult, because then some people will get charged and things like that. But I could understand a deal taking place like that.
Interesting. Well, I'll say this. You've given me a slight glimmer of optimism. So thank you for that, Mike. But now that I think we've got a good idea now of what's going to be happening in Gauteng and where things are going. But I actually want to switch to the national picture for a moment, 2029, and I'll tell you why. So a few weeks ago, I went to your State of the Nation breakfast. Excellent event, by the way. I really enjoyed it. And we saw Prince Mashele, and he, of course, has been on your show many times. You know him well. And he's come up with this Rescue South Africa initiative, which he hasn't really been super explicit, but the way that he's explained it, if they get the right kind of support, this could be a national level political party for 2029. So yeah, just given what you know about Prince and what you know about his policies, do you think that there is a space on the South African political spectrum for someone like that? Simply because I know my view is people always say there are too many political parties, and I say, yes, there are too many political parties, but there are not enough options. So I'd love to get your take on that.
Yeah, Matthew, I think he's on the right road. Let me, and also let me say that even though I'm close to Prince, I'm not part of what he's doing. So I'm just putting that out there. Let's give some context. There's a thing happening in the world where people have got pretty tired with the traditional political parties, and especially the way that they're structured. And there's been a move either within the framework or outside of the framework for people to come along as almost outsiders to say, we've had enough of bad leadership. There's a new way to do it. I'm putting my hand up. I'm going to do it. Right?
Yes.
We've seen it happen. For example, you talk about Milei doing it in Argentina. In many ways, Maloney has done it in Italy.
Yeah.
You've seen it in Zambia. You've seen it in Botswana. People that have come out of the existing political framework to say, I come at this from a different angle, usually business, and to say, we are going to cut this thing because the only way to shake it up is if we all stop playing by the same rules.
Right.
We are going to come in there and we're going to make this a meritocracy, get the best person out there, best person doing the job. Take South Africa as a good example. We loaded with talent, and then you've got a minister like Sisisi Tolashi. I mean, do me a favor, you know what I mean? Or, where you've got to say, come on, guys, we can do better than this.
Sure.
Right? So it makes sense that it should happen in South Africa, especially where people don't have, as you rightly put it, the options that they need to have.
Yes.
Where you've got political options that are common sense options, where you've got people that will fire somebody if they do a bad job, or will understand how the economy should work.
Right.
All of these things make a lot of sense. So back to Prince, he's on that road. The other hallmark of this, wherever it's happened, is generally it's happened behind a very big personality.
Yes.
And I'm yet to see that personality. And with best respects to Prince and full credit to Prince, he doesn't hide the fact that he doesn't see himself as the face of the party. Right?
Okay.
I mean, it might sound like a good idea to have Prince as your president. I think we need, there's still a bit of a personality game here, sadly.
Of course.
Sadly, but that's the way life is. We want the big personalities, and big personalities come in different packages. You can say somebody like Ramaphosa, he doesn't like to do interviews, but he kind of has a presence. Right?
Yes.
Compare him to, say, the dullest person in South African politics, Klabisa, Klabisa from the IFP. Right now, you're not quite sure whether he's awake or alive when you're speaking to him.
Half the time you can't even hear what he's saying. Exactly. He speaks so softly.
He's never going to, but yet you watched Zuma walk in and take all of his votes away from him.
Right.
Because personality versus no personality. So there's still a massive place for personality. And I would be very positive on Prince's thing if he found the personality.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yes,
I think it
do.
still matters. I love the idea. I love the idea of it being crowdfunded.
That's a big differentiator.
It's a big differentiator. The policies are so self-evident that we don't even need to speak about these policies, because they are so self-evident what needs to happen in South Africa. This isn't, I think everybody who's watching us would understand what we would need to do to make South Africa, the South African economy grow, South Africa be a better place. It's not hard. That's the easy part.
Yes, and unlike a lot of these other political parties that list their promises, Prince lists steps.
Yeah.
big difference. And I love that. What are you actually going to do?
Yeah.
So I just had to throw that out there.
So, I do think that it stands a good chance of gaining momentum, and maybe it's the right way to go about it, rather than behind some big personality, and that sets you up for disappointment down the line.
Yes.
You could see this thing sort of snowballing, and eventually the leader emerges. It could happen. It's happened before. But South Africa is ready for its revolution, but not the one that people think.
Right. Not the one with berets.
Not the one with berets and uniforms, but the revolution, because I just do not see that in South Africans. It didn't work back then.
Of course, yes, you're right.
Like I think I've told the story so many times. I lived through apartheid and the worst era, which was the end of it, when it stopped working.
Yeah.
And everyone said, this place was ready to go into civil war. Really? We weren't even close. We were watching soccer. You know what I mean? We weren't.
Exactly.
It's not a revolutionary country.
Yes.
It's a weird thing. It's a Southern African thing. Where has there been revolutions in Africa? Kenya, East Africa,
right,
North Africa.
Yeah.
Never in Southern Africa. Nobody's ever really done it properly. So I'm, maybe to a degree in Zim, but the point is that at some point there's going to be a revolution of people that wear nice clothes, that want a better future, not want to burn the place down. I don't see the appetite for that.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that revolution of people in nicer clothes. I think that's a very positive sort of thing. And yeah, not to paint Prince in any which way. Like I don't know what he views himself as, so I'm not going to say he's centrist or right wing or whatever, but just what comes to mind, and I'm talking from a solutions-based perspective, not an ideological perspective, but you don't have a right in South African politics. There's no real right. Gates and McKenzie likes to say Patriotic Alliance is a right-wing. He even said far right in an interview with Morning Shot, but like you've correctly pointed out.
He's got a version for depending on whose microphone he's speaking into.
Yes.
But, so I agree with you. And, we were discussing this before we started. I think by right-wing, I think we've got to talk about economic policies. Now,
correct.
There's also economic policies, for example, in America, the right has now become defined by protecting rich people. I think that South Africa needs to be the traditional pro-business right, pro-competition right. Because, what really worries me about what's going on in America is that's all about tech billionaires trying to protect their billions, as opposed to having more small businesses. South Africa needs the small business revolution.
Yeah, and now it seems to, in America, have become this thing where they'll say the right is protecting the rich and the Democrats, and now it's this whole thing of who's funding who.
Yeah.
So they've just completely forgotten the people on the lower end. And actually, not to go off topic, but one example I think we do see of the right kind of right-wing politics is actually what you see in the UK with reform, because all of a sudden, where reform seems to be doing better, it's a lot of it in the north of England and a lot of those sorts of middle class and industrial areas where people would generally vote Labour, but now they're voting for reform. And that's why it brings me to that solutions driven, not ideological driven, because as you rightfully mentioned before we started, there's the economic right, and then there's the sort of the equivalent of the EFF, where you've basically got all these airy
look, so what we really need, and I'd go as far as to say something that the world should consider is everybody sort of like, we need more businesses,
yes,
not more rich people I've got a healthy skepticism towards the super rich.
Okay.
Because they tend to use that leverage to make sure that they're protected. I'll give you an example. Let's use a South African example. These guys follow the government around, fixing up the government's failures, and then making sure, Operation Vulindlela and all that.
Yes.
Then that ensures that when they write regulations in South Africa, they make it almost impossible for you and I to go and start a cell phone company because we need a license from government.
Sure.
They've already got a license, so they're saying, we got enough licenses. And the government says, well, you helped us out here, so we'll agree with that. Instead of lowering the barriers to entry, they'll raise the barriers to entry because they're in already.
Right.
Okay? What we need is almost a revolution that happened in, when the world faced economic crises before, which was the end of the 1970s. And you had massive deregulation, which led to an explosion of business and innovation throughout the world and led to the end of communism because the West literally outproduced them and out-innovated them, right? The Eastern Bloc, the USSR as they were then. And so you need that kind of revolution. The problem is that what that gave birth to was people making enormous sums of money and now trying to keep out competition.
Right.
So you've got this sort of crazy situation where, but if South Africa is going to solve its unemployment crisis, which we need to do, and our growth crisis, we're not going to grow it by Woolworths opening up another 1,000 branches. That's not going to happen because they're going to run out of clients. You're going to need more competition to Woolworths. We're not going to solve this by Vodacom employing another couple of thousand people because they're looking to lay off 1,000 people, but we're going to grow it by having 10 competitors to Vodacom. That's really the only way it can work.
I see.
And we're just not doing that. And nobody's talking about that. It's a global problem, but in South Africa, we live it because we've got such high unemployment and such low growth.
Correct. It's really
But yet
amplified.
we've got very big companies relative to the size of the economy.
Yes.
And actually, just to tell you a story going back to the birth of South Africa, I spent a couple of years working in London trying to sell investment in South Africa. I was still in the financial markets. And one of the complaints that we have, this was circa 96, 97, was that people were sort of looking at South Africa saying, what we don't like about South Africa is we arrived expecting, the place not to have banks and this. Instead, you've got like a whole banking system, so there's no real gap for us. McDonald's arrived in South Africa expecting us to have never seen a hamburger.
Sure, they're just going to scoop up the market.
Yeah, because instead you come along seeing that we're eating in those days Wimpies and Steers and we're quite well fed in the hamburger department. So, that has always been the problem, is that our economy is it's well established.
Right, that is
correct. You need to shake up the establishment.
That is correct. And shaking up the establishment is so hard because, like you rightfully pointed out, Mike, you've got the super wealthy, they're in there, we know who they're funding, we know how they're going about this, making sure to, let's say, diversify their risk for all the investors listening.
I had to have a very interesting smile to myself. It's the first time I've even verbalized it.
Okay.
But do you remember when we went for our dressing down in the White House? In the Oval Office.
How could I forget?
Nobody can forget that moment when Cyril introduced his white agriculture minister. Remember those
Yes.
days? Remember, one of the people in the room was Johan Rupert.
Oh, yes, I do remember that.
And you remember Johan Rupert standing up and saying, we need Starlink, Mr. Musk. We need Starlink. Remember that?
Oh,
he said it
I
in
forgot
that meeting.
that. I actually forgot that. I was thinking of him saying that he doesn't need to lock his doors.
But one of the things he said, and to you, Mr. Musk, who happened to be in the room, we need you to come and do Starlink in South Africa so that we can get connected.
Right.
Remember that? Okay?
Yes.
Just recently, the same Johan Rupert has done a deal that cuts out Starlink with Amazon.
Yeah.
Leo, right? So why, if you loved him, because, really what he was doing was encouraging Starlink to push the button so that when he did the deal with Amazon, the government would say, well, at least it's not Starlink. Do you understand what I mean? And that sort of, to me, shows how insidious business can be, big business.
Wow.
Because he must have had Amazon in his pocket when he sat in the White House. He
That's
must have.
unbelievable.
And then there he was promoting Starlink, knowing that the government would be so angered by Starlink and their terms that they'd be very happy for Jan Rupert to then roll out Amazon, which he's done.
Yes.
And, he goes and makes another R1 billion or whatever the number is. But it's that kind of thing that people sometimes don't see or just won't see as to how big business behaves.
Mike, I'm so glad to hear you bring this up, because I would have never connected the dots. I've never heard anybody connect the dots like that. And now I'm also curious to see how this is going to play out, because now with Space 42 also coming to South Africa, what on earth is going to go on there? One has to wonder. But this is the thing that always frustrates me, Mike, is you're absolutely right. We need more business, especially more businesses. And unemployment is just a pivotal issue. And like you said, there needs to be an establishment shakeup, but the political parties seem rigid, out of date. They don't want to move. We see that the funders continue their way.
Well, just have a nice look who those funders are. Those funders are really well established, big businesses.
Naspers and the like.
So you go and give money to every one of those parties.
Yes.
So that those parties then won't say, you know what we need? We need more news services. Right? Like I did speak to somebody from the DA who had a problem with online gambling. So I said, well, why don't you write a bill when you're getting sponsored by Betway?
Right.
I mean, who's ever going to stop the gambling problem that we've got in South Africa when Betway is giving hundreds of millions to each of the parties?
Yeah, you're cutting off your own money.
Yeah, so, you start seeing how business can influence politics.
Sure.
On all sides. And you're just seeing the democratization of that big money. And that's the problem that we've got in South Africa. And I'm waiting to hear a party that talks about that I haven't heard one.
Right.
Because ultimately, they also want to get money from Betway. Or Naspers or whatever.
Of course, and that's why I just think to myself, I just sometimes sit and I think we do all of this work and research and things, and then I just at the end of it, I think, God, please help us. You're the only one who can help us, because the parties don't want to help us. Big business doesn't want to help us. But before I sound too negative, Mike, I'd like to let you have the floor for one final comment. Are you positive about South Africa's future?
I'm going to say that I'm more positive about South Africa than the developed world.
Interesting.
Now, if you sort of use the old maxim of misery loves company, sometimes we need to hear, that at least you can see how the problems in South Africa can be solved. In some of those more established economies, the way it looks at the moment, the only road is down. Now, in South Africa, could the roads get worse? I suppose they could, but probably not. So we're kind of, bumbling along at ground level. There's people on the 10th floor. The fall is quite high. I do see some parallels, Matthew, just to give you one of my observations, is that I see very, very big parallels with where South Africa sits now to where South Africa sat in the later 80s, when we had this big problem of what to do about apartheid. It had made us poor. It had made us isolated. It had made the country, an unpleasant place.
Yes.
And the feeling was kind of universal that we need to do something. Right. Everybody, there were myriad different views, except for the one that made the most sense, which was to say, let's just stop it. Then the economy will improve, we'll be no longer isolated, etc., etc. And ultimately common sense prevailed, and that happened. South Africa finds itself in the same place right now, right? We are living at the end of the liberation era, bad policies, everybody disliking each other, but the silent majority saying there's got to be a better way out there. We all kind of know what the better way is, which is the government being less involved in our lives. Right?
Yes.
Let's just do it. At some point, somebody is going to start those talks. Somebody. And that movement has to come out of the black middle class. that actually say, you know what, I want a better life for my children.
Right.
And to that extent, I'm not going to support bad policies, be they economic policies or race-based legislation or anti-business legislation. Let's make South Africa work. So we're on that edge. The question is, and I'm always sort of feel that people always want better. So yes, you can say, oh, no, Julius Malema would love the place to burn, and he probably would. Well, but does he really? He lives in a mansion in Sandhurst. He doesn't want the place to burn. He says he does, but really what he wants is his keys to the safe. So, but the majority of South Africans, when they decide they want a better country, they'll make smarter decisions. It could start happening in November where, as I said, the local government elections in most cases are going to be a referendum, not an election. What is more important to you, ideology or service delivery? Those are your two options.
Right.
The ideology has given you potholes, it's given you no traffic lights, no street lights, blah, blah, blah. Right? Service delivery fixes all of that up. It's your decision.
Right. Well, to everybody watching, I think that's an important message for us to end on. Register to vote. Make sure to show up on the day and make that vote count. Mike, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you, Matthew. Thanks for inviting me.
No, it's only my pleasure. Well, thanks everybody for tuning into this video. If you enjoyed it, please remember to subscribe to this channel for more content. Subscribe to State of the Nation. And yes, I'd love to hear all of your thoughts in the comment section below. And until next time, I'm Matthew Cohen, and this is the Power Pod.